Khởi nghiệp sáng tạo, chủ đề từ địa phương ra quốc tế tại TechFest Việt Nam 2024. Dựa trên những đặc thù riêng của từng địa phương, không chỉ giúp tối ưu hóa việc khai thác nguồn lực sẵn có, mà còn mở ra những hướng đi đột phá, thúc đẩy phát triển kinh tế xã hội bền vững. Trong phiên thảo luận đầu tiên với chủ đề khai thác thế mạnh đặc trưng, phát triển hệ sinh thái khởi nghiệp sáng tạo tại địa phương, chúng ta sẽ cùng lắng nghe những bài học kinh nghiệm quý báu từ một chuyên gia quốc tế. Được biết đến như một doanh nhân kỳ cựu đã từng sáng lập nhiều doanh nghiệp trong lĩnh vực công nghệ sinh học, tài chính và dịch vụ, diễn giả của chúng ta còn đang nắm giữ một vị trí quan trọng tại J.E. Austin Associates, một công ty đa quốc gia chuyên tư vấn phát triển với hơn 700 dự án thành công tại 127 nước. Ông còn là chuyên gia tư vấn cho Ngân hàng Thế giới, OECD cùng nhiều chính phủ, doanh nghiệp, cải thiện năng suất, tăng khả năng cạnh tranh và phát triển kinh tế. Diễn giả của chúng ta có mối quan hệ gắn bó sâu sắc với Việt Nam. Ông từng khởi xướng sáng kiến năng lực cạnh tranh quốc gia năm 2002 và dẫn dắt các dự án thúc đẩy khởi nghiệp, đổi mới sáng tạo như Sweet EP và Tigers at Mekong. Không để quý vị phải chờ lâu thêm nữa, xin trân trọng giới thiệu lên sân khấu ông Kevin Murphy, Chủ tịch và Giám đốc điều hành của J.E. Austin Associates.
Please say this with me. Viet Nam, nation of innovation. Viet Nam, nation of innovation. I don't hear anything. I don't know if you want to hear about innovation today. Okay, one more time. Everyone. Viet Nam, nation of innovation. Come on, thank you. I first want to thank my sponsors from the Ministry of Science and Technology, Huang Min, and the development of the very important Provincial Innovation Index. I would like to thank the Haiphong People's Committee and City Government for the invitation to be here. I want to recognize the role of NATEC, the National Agency of Technology, Entrepreneurship, and Commercialization. I especially want to recognize the Swiss government and Swiss EP Project and SECO, who are here today, because they sponsored my trip here. Could you just raise your hands, people from SECO? I'm not sure where you are. Oh, there they are, right in the front, yes. The Swiss have been supporting the Vietnam's innovation ecosystem and startup ecosystem for the last 10 years. They are a very committed partner. Switzerland also ranks #1 on the National Innovation Index, so we can learn a lot from Switzerland. I want to note also the Improving Private Sector Competitiveness Project sponsored by the USA, which has been committed to Vietnam's startup system, supporting many of the high-growth companies and pioneering enterprises. I want to thank Tony from VNEI and also recognize the important and innovative role of BK Holdings and the Hanoi University of Science and Technology, and many of the others, especially our visitors from Korea, who I'll be mentioning later. So, there are over 500 years of experience in the audience, so getting your ideas is very important. I turned 70 this year, so I have only 45 years of experience, but we have half a millennia of experience in the audience. So my role is just to throw out a few ideas and get us going. So we know that innovation is turning ideas into value creation. We know the definition. We don't have to. Just a few, I'm going to just mention that this is not my first visit to Haiphong. In 2002, I came to Haiphong, a very different city than it is now. I came here with Deputy Prime Minister Kam. I brought the former Prime Minister of Ireland, and with Madame Lan of the Viet Nam Commerce and Industry Chamber, we launched the first Vietnam Competitiveness Initiative here in Haiphong and Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. And since that time, we have to give a big shout out to Vietnam's success. We have to understand innovation in the arc of Vietnam's economic policies, and we should take a moment to recognize what Vietnam has done to date, because it has been extremely successful. It is one of the most successful economic growth stories, poverty reduction stories. What did it do to get here? First, it gained access to attractive markets on favorable terms through the WTO, through the bilateral trade agreement with the US, and many other things. Secondly, it mobilized impressive levels of private and public investment to then go to those markets. The third thing it did was it invested in infrastructure to make that investment productive. And then it invested heavily in people to make them productive as well. It ensured reasonable macroeconomic stability and a well-diversified financial system that was also stable. It improved the regulatory institutions, more work to do there, obviously, and it also encouraged provincial competitiveness, and from the VNCI there was the Provincial Competitiveness Index. Now we have the Provincial Innovation Index, so we've moved on. Also, Vietnam encouraged industry competitiveness initiatives, and now we focus on innovation. So, message number one, innovation must be the top priority now. Why? There are several reasons. The economic trade regime is being disrupted. Secondly, there's an accelerating level of technological change that's going to disrupt the traditional industries. And third, World Bank has shown that many countries are successful in the early stages of growth, and Vietnam has achieved middle income status, the lower rungs of middle income status. But so many countries then hit a plateau. They hit a ceiling. They don't make it to high income status. Now we know that the government of Vietnam has set as a goal to achieve high income status by 2045. We know from the data that this can only be done through innovation-led growth. The World Bank has recently put out a study, I think you've seen it, both globally and for Vietnam, showing that unless Vietnam can move from investment-led growth and infusion-led growth to innovation-led growth, it will be difficult to keep moving into high-income status. And the World Economic Forum has also echoed these findings. So for 5 years, I worked with the World Economic Forum on their Global Agenda Council. We set the agenda for Davos. We would meet every fall, months before Davos, and set the agenda. And the World Economic Forum also, with some leading economists, a lot of data, a lot of surveys, found that as you move up in the income per capita, innovation-led growth becomes more and more important. For that reason, the two last pillars of the Global Competitiveness Index have to do with innovation as a driver of productivity growth and the mindsets of businesses. We have to work on the mindset not only of government, but of businesses to have a future orientation. And we heard already that Vietnam has achieved much, but has to do more. It is 44th out of 133 economies on the Global Innovation Index. But as we know, we still have to get into the top 100 of city competitiveness. We're in the second, 100 to 200, but it's time to move into be one of the top 100 science and technology clusters in the world. We're not yet there. So, as we see also in productivity, labor productivity, Vietnam is still behind Malaysia, Thailand, China, Indonesia. I know that it will soon overtake those at the rate of productivity growth we are seeing. But there's still work to do. Message number 3, that the rate of technological change is accelerating exponentially. According to ChatGPT and Sam Altman, next year, AI will be at the level of the human personality, the human brain. And it will be very hard to distinguish if a message is coming from AI or from a person. When I was in LA International Airport, I was calling my Uber driver, and it was answered by a human being, I thought. It was AI saying, well, he's not available. What do you need? Okay, I'll let him know. And then they hung up. And it wasn't a person, but it seemed like a person. It is moving very, very fast. Also, I recommend Ray Kurzweil, too. His latest book, The Singularity is Nearer. And he talks about, at the current level of exponential change, not only in chips and digital technology, but in every other industry. So pretty soon, health and medical devices will be implanted in people through nanotechnology. Our human capacities are going to merge with the capacity of technology, and it's really important to understand the rapid change that is coming. This is a technological revolution that we're in the middle of. Vietnam cannot miss this revolution. So how do you get there? Here's a very simple model. Productive people in innovative companies within a world-class innovation system. And that brings national prosperity. So what makes people productive? Well, first of all, Vietnam has already achieved an amazing result. You see how Vietnam is an outlier. The science and technology, engineering, and math scores of Vietnamese students are already, according to the international PISA scores, so far advanced, well above other countries at this income level. This is an amazing achievement, and that's productive people. The creative arts are also productive, so creating new and useful things is very much in technology, but also original films, creativity. It's also language and communication, so you can interact with the rest of the world. That makes people productive. This is a shorthand for what makes people productive. Now, as for companies, competitive companies, oh, by the way, educators in the room, you have a tremendous role to play in creating Vietnam's innovation system, ecosystem. If you're a company in the room, you can measure it. So we heard about the Provincial Innovation Index. It's so important because when Hub and I were at Harvard Business School years ago, they taught us if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So you have to be able to measure it if you're going to manage it. So companies, Boston Consulting Group has metrics for measuring competitive companies. And now we get another major message today. Message number 4, everyone has a role in building the innovative ecosystem. National governments, city governments, provincial governments, universities and research institutes, entrepreneurs, big companies, medium companies, international partners. So let me just now talk about each of those things that we talked about. Let's talk about national government. Well, let me just point out here, you can learn a lot from those who are showing the way and who are highly ranked. So again, Switzerland is #1 in innovation, not only from WIPO, but also the World Economic Forum. So you can look at what they're doing on institutions, human capital research, infrastructure, market sophistication, and what they spend on R&D. So the Swiss are good models. But let me tell you that there are really 3 national models that I've seen. Maybe there are more. But the Swiss model is very much like the US model. It is private sector driven because it's a federal structure. So most of the education is funded by the cantons, or in the United States, at the state level. It's not you can't call it a national thing. It is really the private sector leads and the government's support and help. So that's one model. And an example of this is the Boston Life Sciences Cluster. Another is Silicon Valley. There are so many of these. So that's one model. But there's another model. And it is I want to refer here to our friends from Korea. So I think a number of you are here from Korea. Korea has an amazing set of amazing innovation ecosystem. I just want to mention here the pioneering role of Daedok Innopolis. Daedok Innopolis has helped create so much innovation in Korea, and now you have many clusters of innovation around the country. That model has been government-led. It was an act of parliament, the Congress, the Korean Congress, to create the Daedok Innopolis. There's been a lot of government funding. Of course, the private sector corporations are very important, but that is really kind of a government-driven. The government is the leading partner, I would say. And we can hear later from our friends from Korea if they agree with me or push back on that. That's another model. Maybe that's closer to Vietnam because of the leadership role of the government in driving innovation. There is a third model, which I would like to call they call in Europe the triple helix model. With this we see in Sweden, in the Kista Science Center. So it's where the private sector, corporations, the government, and the universities, they work together, and they're very equal partners, and they call it the triple helix model. Of course, they have Vinnova, which is the Swedish Innovation Institute. So when you look at models, and you can look at China, what they're doing there, but when you look at models, you have to think about what is the most appropriate model for the national government to follow. So I can also mention the role of Israel. I was working very closely with the Minister of Economy and the Ministry of Economy for 6 months to develop their new strategy. It was just completed before the war broke out. Such a tragedy. So sorry to see that violence happening. It also distracts them from implementing it. But Israel, they had 15 different policies, initiatives, actions, investments. They were very focused on 8 high-tech areas and wanting to lead the world in these high-tech, but they had very clear policies. And we can talk about those later if you like. I also want to note that I was very impressed with the model of the Hanoi University of Science and Technology, where a university actually owns the venture capital fund. Talk about bringing them together. So now let's talk a little bit about the role of universities. And I want to mention here University of California, Berkeley. Why? Because Stanford is a private university, MIT is a private university, but Berkeley is a government-funded university. It's a state institution. And nonetheless, they have been ranked as the top public university for startup funders. One of my friends is Jerry Engel. He and I were presenting in Barcelona on clusters of innovation, cities of innovation in Barcelona. Jerry is now retired from this role, but he used to run the function at Berkeley of commercialization of research. So There were 8 people working for him. Their job was to go around and help the professors commercialize research. The university owned the patent, and they would work with the professors in the private sector. And their model of commercialization of research for a public government university, very interesting and very successful. Now I want to talk about cities and regional governments. And I would like to pay homage to my professor, Michael Porter, from Harvard Business School. He is the top-cited economist. He is the top-cited business author in the world. Unfortunately, for health reasons, he can no longer continue to work. But he, after studying so many clusters and cities and regions, identified that competitiveness and innovative clusters, they were geographically located together. So city governments are very important. At the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab asked our council, our Global Agenda Council, to study. He said, you know, there are only 190 countries around the world, and they have lots of tools, economic tools, but there are thousands of cities. Thousands, and they don't always have the tools. So let's find some competitiveness tools for them. So I just want to share 1 or 2 of the findings. We studied 32 cities. I did personally study 7 of those 32 cities, and we published our findings with the World Economic Forum. Successful cities invested in hard connectivity, transportation, communication, airports, connections, international connections, but soft connectivity was even more important. And that means innovation ecosystems. It means how citizens relate to the government through e-commerce and applications. It means how you get people to work together. I'm reminded, soft connectivity, one of the early stories from Silicon Valley was First Tuesdays. The first Tuesday of every month, the venture capitalists, the professors, the startups, the companies, they'd all get together for breakfast. First Tuesday of every month, and they got to know each other and share ideas, open architecture. Soft connectivity is very important for the innovation ecosystem. So I think I want to just close by saying, what are the major messages we'd like to leave with you? Innovation is the #1 important thing to focus on. So the fact that you are here today, perfect. Second, there's a huge challenge coming for Vietnam to break through the middle income trap and move into innovation-led growth. The importance isn't so much what to do. We know what to do. We know what drives innovation. The hard part is how and who. That is what we found in the city competitiveness thing. The difficult thing is, how do we do it? What are the specific policies, mechanisms, organizations, institutions? I find a bit of a lack here. I think we need more research institutes in Vietnam. In other countries, I see a lot of government investment in not just universities, but separate research institutes in new areas of technology, where the institutes work with the universities and the companies. And we see lots of challenges. I think, my own sense, the government knows we want to work on innovation. It knows the what. But we are still figuring out, are we still figuring out the how? Exactly what do we do? What do we do first, second, third? Who does it? How do we bring people together? So developing the innovation ecosystem is extremely important. So I want to close by saying, 2025, Vietnam, nation of innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy, for your insightful presentation and for your kind word. Xin cảm ơn phần trình bày của ông Kevin Murphy. Qua phần trình bày vừa rồi, chúng ta hẳn đã có cái nhìn rõ nét hơn cho sự phát triển, cách thức hợp tác, cũng như là cách khai thác các nguồn lực của Trung ương và địa phương tại Việt Nam. Qua đó nhìn nhận rõ hơn về những thách thức cần vượt qua và tìm ra những cơ hội để biến những tiềm năng đặc thù của địa phương trở thành động lực phát triển. Tiếp nối chương trình, chúng ta hãy cùng tìm hiểu sâu hơn về thế mạnh đặc thù, thách thức và cơ hội tại một số địa phương tiêu biểu tại Việt Nam và Hàn Quốc qua phiên thảo luận với chủ đề khai thác thế mạnh đặc thù, phát triển hệ sinh thái khởi nghiệp sáng tạo tại địa phương, biến thách thức thành cơ hội, tìm giải pháp cho tương lai. Phiên thảo luận số 1 này sẽ được điều phối bởi ông Trần Trí Dũng, quản lý khu vực Hà Nội của Street EP. Xin mời ông Trần Trí Dũng lên điều phối phiên ạ. Chúng ta sẽ cùng chào đón sự tham gia của các diễn giả khách mời. Về phía địa phương Hàn Quốc, ông Park Dae-hee, giám